things up to the Cinder YouTube channel, and I think I've been putting the links at the end of each day. Yes. So
yeah, it looks like you were.
I mean, you've been here, so you probably have no interest in watching these, but just so you're aware that they're there. Okay. Yeah. So any announcements? So it looks like that fix to Nova worked. So the gates are gradually clearing out, but there must have been a big backlog because stuff has just been sitting and sitting. So anyway, but it looks like that's okay. I never did look into that other bug that Melanie Witt had reported, so I'm still hoping that it's intermittent. Well, it must be intermittent if stuff passed, so that's good. But I'll have to take a closer look at some point. Okay. Right, so I just mentioned, so we'll be meeting with the Glance team. So some technical issues came up with the way, so Glance has the ability to use Cinder as a Glance store to just put its images in, which is nice. But then there's some complications depending on what backend Cinder is actually using. So when Cinder is using an NFS backend, there have been some problems and bugs reported, and Rajat's been working on that. And so we had a meeting yesterday, but some issues came up and we're trying to figure out how they should be resolved. So the Glance team is going to come back. This time they'll meet with us here. So anyway, so I wanted to bring that up because I'd like the NetApp people, since your backend uses the NFS driver, you may have some interest in this and some good stuff to contribute. So, so I'm glad we'll be doing it here, but that'll be at 1540. I reshuffled the topics slightly, but they're roughly what they were yesterday. And we'll just, we'll be flexible to hit the Glance deadline at the end. But apologies in advance to Gorka. I was trying to avoid, Gorka contributed a lot of interesting topics. I was trying to spread them out so he wouldn't have to have a full day, but it looks like after our first topic, this may be Gorka Day. Which is good for everybody except Gorka, basically. Okay, if you came in late, please go ahead and put your name on the Etherpad as an attendee. And that's it. So just a question, are there any second thoughts from yesterday's sessions that people want to address? And I just want to remind you, way at the bottom of the Etherpad, we're collecting topics in case to cover on Friday if we have some space, or we can have a really early mid-cycle if some things come up that are that need to be discussed. So please keep the Etherpad updated as you go. Take notes in it, add comments, add questions. Right, and Luigi would like to make Gorka Day an official name.
I second that motion.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm eating breakfast, and that's rude. Okay, so then let's, so the first topic, I'll update the PTG bot, excuse me. So Tushar's here. He put in a request during one of our Cinder meetings that he wanted something to work on for Cinder, and we all applaud that. So thank you for volunteering. So we identified a feature that would be good, and it's one that Eric had proposed, the reset state robustification. So Tushar wants some advice on how to implement a feature. And what I was thinking we could do here is we can also take some notes and robustify our documentation around this to help out the next person who wants to do it. So I will be quiet now, and Tushar, you can introduce yourself and we can get rolling here.
So actually, this is the first time in this cycle I want to implement a feature, because in last cycle I just do some small patches. So, but I don't know much about how we implement a feature, like a big, because there are so many multiple patches in a single feature. So what is the process? And I've seen this feature was almost like a year ago proposed, but no one is willing to work on it. So I decided, so if it is okay, that I will proceed through this.
Okay, yeah, so the first step will be, so this is one of the, oh, so we never actually approved this. Okay, so, well, it's got a lot of plus twos, but I minused it because it's going into Victoria. Okay, so first thing we'll do, so we have some unimplemented specs, and we also have like a folder of untargeted specs where people have come up with good ideas, but for some reason that have gotten to the point where they've been discussed with the community and everybody agrees this is a good direction, but then for some reason they weren't implemented. So in either case, the first thing you would do is take over this this patch and change the so you can look through and see if there are any outstanding comments that need to be addressed. And if not, just repropose it for, just move the spec into the Wallaby directory, because that will be the official place for this. So that would be one thing, and then we would go and review it. Now, as far as the actual spec itself, it looks like there is at least one jerk, namely me, had a question about how this would work. So there's something about a force flag. I think the idea behind this is that there's some actions that users can do that we know are going to lead to a bad result in most cases. So we can sort of anticipate that and give them some type of informative and useful message. But on the other hand, sometimes you want to still do it anyway if you're an administrator, because presumably you understand all the implications and are in a position to take appropriate action to make sure everything continues to work.
Okay.
So the question was something about, do we add a force flag to allow you to do it in the API, I think, or?
Well, there was two options there.
Okay.
So we could model some of the other Cinder operations and add a force flag to the API. I don't really think we should do that. I think I like the idea more of having the API do things that we know are at least internally consistent, and then add a tool to Cinder manage that will let them do things that they're not really probably supposed to be doing, but may come up with some weird reason that they want to because we used to support it.
Mm-hmm. I kind of like, just muted myself. I kind of like that idea. Any general observations?
Also, we need to stick with a concept I think I was pushing a while ago, which is don't add anything else called force anywhere because it's too vague and it leads to weird expectations about what's going to happen. So if we have something even in Cinder manage, we need to call it something better than just force, because what force ends up meaning is I want this to just do what I want it to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so
But actually, I have a question that this spec
sure.
was proposed by someone another. So I need to repropose the entire patch for this, so I can work on this.
Yeah, you can, go into Gerrit and do a git review -d and take it'll download the review for you, and then just make whatever edits you need, and then go ahead and push it. I mean, git review, and then we'll finish the review on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the main change is that you need to move it to the Wallaby directory. So
Yeah.
if you need help offline, feel free to ping me on IRC and I can walk you through the process.
Okay.
So I think we still need to add to the spec something about the Cinder manage stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I think the other main thing that we need to think through, I think I listed 2 cases in the spec of specific things that we want to block with this. There's probably more. I don't know how we want to go about thinking through if we need to add other scenarios that should be blocked, or if we think we can do that later, or what. It gets kind of weird with API microversions and stuff if we add some now and then we want to add more restrictions to it later. So there's probably some benefit to making sure we have most of what we want the first time around. So I guess mostly anywhere that we can do reset state stuff, we need to kind of just think through like combinations that just don't make sense, like resetting a volume to available while it still has attachment records is one that I called out in there. There's probably a few others that we could think of if we stare at it for a minute and just try to think up stuff that doesn't really make sense.
And how would you approach the case where you change the attached status to detach, but you still have attachment records alive? Should we force the user to manually remove them, which is an option?
I think it's supposed
to new APIs.
I think it's already supposed to delete those when you do this. If you change attach status, I think it's supposed to remove the attachment records or detach them or something, but I don't know.
I thought we weren't doing that. Maybe I read it wrong. Okay.
I think it does from the same side, but not on the Nova side.
What's that?
I think it removes the record from the Cinder side, but we still need to remove that from the Nova side.
Right, but you kind of have to remove them from the Cinder side because you can't really be in a detached state with attachment records. So I mean, that makes sense. So it ends up being kind of a forced detach on the Cinder side, right?
So we had talked at one point about, right, we have this API, the Nova API that we can use to sort of poke it, to take a look at the states of VMs. Is that where we use it? Sorry, I'm being vague, but.
Eric, what I'm seeing in the code is that we are, how should I put it nicely? The code is not doing what I think it should be doing. We are, when you change the status to detach, the attached status, we just go to the database and change it. We don't go to the driver and tell it to actually remove the exports, which can be a problem because some drivers, when you try to delete a volume, they will complain if the volume is still mapped.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole purpose of reset state is that it's supposed to kind of adjust values under the covers, right, to clean things up. So I'm not sure that it's really supposed to make driver calls to do this.
No, I'm not suggesting that it makes the driver calls, but if we are talking about making it more robust and complaining about things that doesn't make much sense, I think this is one case where we could say, you want me to change to detach, but I don't want to do it because you still have attachments. Please clean them. You have an API, make necessary calls to remove all the attachments. And once that is done, first of all, it will probably automatically change to available and detach. So you will not need this call. Because I think that's one of the major cases, besides changing from error to available. In one of the cases is when Nova and Cinder were out of sync, and people just wanted to make Cinder, the volume in Cinder available again. And now they can do it just by removing the attachments.
I suspect that we would maybe want a flag to the reset state call that would do the attachment removal for us, because it's in the scenario of admins trying to just clean things up. I don't know that we want to make them call this and see an error and then call attachment delete and then call this again.
Sounds good. I need a flag to make it happen for you, similar to what you did with the cascade delete of a snapshot, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So are we thinking that functionality you just described will go into the Cinder Manage tool, or we could handle this at the
I think
API?
that's the reset state API.
Okay.
So sorry, I was dealing with a barky dog. So what was okay? Orca's taking notes, it looks like.
Not really. I was just going to add what I had suggested. I haven't been taking any other notes. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Just for this as to what change we want to make for reset state.
Okay, so it sounds like part of this is going to be we can enhance the API call to have some correct behavior, in addition to just like rejecting.
So is that going to be an optional thing?
Yeah, I'm waiting for Gorka to finish typing. Then. Okay.
Yep, done.
You're seeing this, so we would add this as a parameter to the API call, but like not force, but delete all attachments if necessary, something like that. Or
yeah.
Okay.
Or call the driver for detachment. We can discuss it on the spec itself. I just wanted to mention it.
Okay, so Tushar's, so part of this will be revising the spec to so we want.
So maybe
It looks like we want three different things here to go on. So one is improving the API call as it is. The other one is catching these situations where you might shoot yourself in the foot. And then the third is moving some of this to Cinder Manage to go ahead and do it anyway. if an operator wants to.
Yeah, I suspect we may want to move some cases to the Cinder managed thing. Like, I mean, you can have a volume status of error managing deleting. I don't know if anyone ever should reset state a volume into that. So we may want to audit some of those to see if we should just flat out, restrict why would you ever do this kind of state changes too.
Right, and that reminds me, there was a bug or something, because we had this discussion. There's some states that aren't supposed to be exposed through the API that are
Right.
in inconsistent ways. I think it showed up in the there's something about listing deleted. It was something about the volume list.
Oh yeah, it
The
was
filter
trying to
wasn't working.
query. It was trying to query a list of objects that were like in an error state,
Right.
and
And
it
was
wouldn't find ones that were in error underscore something, even though it would show that if you showed it at the API.
right. All right. I need to take a note to myself to go track that down, because I don't know if the person who was originally interested in it. Well, apparently they didn't follow up, because as far as I know, this isn't fixed anywhere. All right, so I need to do that. So I'm sorry, Tushar, that's not really part of your thing, but
I guess we should also look at backup reset state for this.
okay. I'm wondering whether it might make sense for Tushar to put together an Etherpad with a few basic things, and then we can all sort of look at it and make some more suggestions about various states, because the more experienced people working on Cinder have seen a lot of these things and can probably think of some more.
I wanted to ask regarding one case related to this.
Sure.
So there was a case I handled in which the same scenario occurred. This volume was stuck in detaching state, and then they reset its state to available and attached state to detached, but there were leftover records on the Nova side. So they had to manually clean up that. So is it suggested that we change the status to in use and then detach it again from Nova side, or it's better to stay like change it to detached? Like I preferred changing it to in use and then detaching it again.
I see. So your idea is you put it in use, and then they have to go through Nova to detach it, and then Nova knows to update everything.
Yeah, then
If I
Nova will also
misunderstand.
clear out the attachment tables.
Well, Nova already can do that in some situations with the force detach. All right.
I think in general it's not a great idea to change things to available and detach, and it's, if possible, going through the Nova flow is better. If that's not possible, yeah.
Yes, you're right, Lucas. Sorry for interrupting you. But from my experience, usually operators use cleanup attachment when instance is unavailable or backend is unavailable. So we don't usually need to clean up attachment on our side or clean up connections to backend. Probably in the future we want to expose this command as a separate command. So something like clean up attachments, which will clean up attachment in the database, test to clean up attachment or drop connections from the backend in Nova or something like it. But speaking about
Yeah,
replicate, I don't think we need to clean up attachments from the backend and Nova.
yeah, I think that goes to what we were discussing just a moment ago about passing a flag to the reset state for it to actually make the calls to the backend to remove the attachments. But I'm thinking that maybe in the meantime, we should at least document that the reset state that we had before for in use to available and things like that, it's probably better to use the micro version that allows you to remove the attachments. And that way you don't have to forcefully do anything. You are doing a normal flow where you say delete the attachment that you have, and then the volume comes back to available. So I think we should just document that, because a lot of people don't know that we now have this new attachment API, which is great for this kind of thing, to know where a volume is attached, to know if it's what attachment does it have, and things like that. So in the meantime, a bit of documentation could help.
Okay. Yeah, and I've been thinking if we could really use somebody who does information architecture or something to like recategorize the stuff on our documentation website to make it easier to find things. Because we have so much really good information there, but it's not always easy to find. And I've done it where I've written stuff up and then can't find the document that I actually modified when I want to point somebody to it. So I'm just throwing that out there, not saying anybody here has to. If you know anybody who wants to do information architecture or does that kind of thing, that would be a great. They don't have to do any coding. They don't even have to make pull requests. They can just draw it out on a piece of paper, and then I can make the doc change. Okay, Tushar, I don't know if we've actually helped you at all so far. I think the main thing is, so the first step is going to be take over the spec, repropose it for Wallaby, and there's some open questions here. I think come to the next Cinder meeting and we can revisit some of this because I don't know, how does that sound to you? Okay, and Jay's volunteering to help you out in terms of getting the spec rearranged and in the right place and stuff. So ping him in IRC.
Okay, I'll
Okay.
do that.
Okay, great. Any other questions, observations, or I guess for everybody else, in the meantime, as you're thinking of other cases that could be covered by this, feel free to write them in the Etherpad, and then Tushar can come back and take a look and add them. But I think we'll be discussing this at the Cinder meetings for the next few weeks, so that's good. Okay, all right, sounds like we've covered that. Okay, and if you get to look at this later today, Tushar, well, I guess it's late where you are anyway, so probably not. But we can revisit on Friday, which I guess is tomorrow, if you have any follow-up questions. Okay, and then there's IRC and the Cinder meetings. So we're interested in helping you get this thing implemented. I know Eric's very motivated because he's been wanting to do this for like 3 cycles now. So we'll help you out. Okay, let me update the PTG bot. And next topic is going to be Ceph minimum supported version. Let me actually type this in. Okay, so what's come up is that, and Gorka noticed that we just have this RBD driver that supports Ceph, and we don't say, like, Ceph has a lot of versions, and we don't say which one we're targeting, and it's becoming a problem because there's some additions we're looking to make in the Ceph driver that would be greatly enhanced by some of the new APIs that Ceph is offering and some new functionality. But if we're supporting pretty old versions, then there are ways to fake some of this stuff. Well, I guess it's not faking it, but there are ways to do this remarkably inefficiently. And we would prefer not to do that. So we took a survey just on the mailing list to see what operators are working with. So I put the results in this Google spreadsheet, which I hope everybody can open. So let's take a quick look at it. And I think there were some interesting comments that came up. So I just asked this general question about the size of your cloud, just to get a rough idea. I don't know if those are good measures, so we could use feedback on that. But it looks like there were a bunch of small clouds and then a bunch of big clouds that responded. Now, as far as the versions of Ceph being used, I mean, a lot of people are on O and N, which is really good. So Ceph stopped supporting, well, I don't know exactly how they describe it, but Mimic is end of life as far as the Ceph project is concerned. So they want to concentrate on O and N. So it looks like a lot of people are actually using the newer ones. And then Gorka wanted this question about, are they using Ceph for backups? So most of the people using Ceph are not using it for backups yet anyway. But the ones who are seem to be using the newer versions, which is good. And then, so it looks like there was one operator who manages, I think, like 12 clouds, all of very big size. So he's got Hammer in the legacy clusters, but they're draining those. But he's putting Mimic on the new ones. So he's going to be a lot newer than he used to be, but still not cutting edge. And I think the reason why is, so some of these comments about, why are you using the older versions? So it's hard to upgrade, but, people want to use the packages for their distribution, not necessarily what Ceph has got. So that's part of the problem. And then what versions of Ceph we should support. So at least Nautilus, well, we're pretty much going to do that. But the point about the one with package support in major distributions. So, for instance, if Red Hat is shipping Mimic, then a lot of people are going to be using Mimic. So I think, I don't know, my impression was we should just do whatever the Ceph project's doing. So if they don't do Mimic, then we shouldn't either. But I think was too optimistic on my part. I think what we really need to do is support whatever the major distributions are supporting, because that's what people are going to be using.
Well, I guess for just for the sake of making this more complicated, do we have a particular theory about why we need to bind it to the versions that Ceph says are supported versus just going off of version X as a feature that we want to use in Cinder? I guess I'm saying, what is the actual goal here? Is it to make sure we're testing with the right thing, or what? Make sure we can support thing.
Yeah, this is related, for example, to the case of a clone API v2. You know, the one that will help those nasty complaints about your image is in use, you cannot delete it. So if we were to limit the version of the cluster to a version that includes that feature, the fix would be trivial. But if we have to support both the ones that have it and the ones that don't, we either only fix it for the new clusters, or we have easy code for the new clusters and complicated code for the other ones. So we are adding more complexity to the driver, or we are splitting the driver into two. And what we split into two drivers now, maybe a new feature comes in and we split into three, and that keeps going and going. So it's either that, or we increase our code complexity, or we set a minimum version. That's basically, that is what originated this question, the case of image in use depth.
Yeah, and the RBD v2 clone API one is not a terribly hard one because it was in Mimic, which is already end of life. It's also worth noting that Manila does state version support for Ceph, and I forget exactly what they state, but they do have some policy in Manila about what versions they actually support.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay, well, that would be a good starting point, would be to see what they're supporting.
Manual could depend on CFFS feature, which is not available in old releases.
Yeah, that's a good point. They're going to have to support CFS.
Well, they
But
have
it's,
a metric in their
it's only
document.
my guess, I'm not sure.
So they have a matrix about versions that are supported there.
So we could do something similar, and in our case, since we could work since Mimic, we could just, since the cloning API, Eric says it's in Mimic, we could just say Mimic is the oldest we support, or people think we should support them all.
I think that makes plenty of sense for now to say Mimic or newer, but then what do we say a year from now?
Well, depending on the new features, because some of the new features that Ceph introduced are tied to specific Cinder features, not to fixing a limitation we have in the driver. So I think it may be different. If it's about a new feature, you just say in Cinder driver, okay, your cluster does not support that feature is not available. That's easier to say than to say, yeah, in older cluster versions, you have this bug or something like that. I don't know.
I guess the other thing is there's the comment, the very last comment on the spreadsheet at row 63 about using RDO OpenStack. I don't know how up to date. I imagine they use a fairly recent Ceph.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if you install on RDO, is that just using ceph.com repositories for stuff? I don't know where the Ceph packages actually come from in that situation.
I thought they came from the CentOS storage SIG.
That might be correct.
I mean, it depends on if you're using triple O or not to deploy it. Then it's deploying it in containers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not. I think I think for Manila CI, I'm pretty sure that they're using the packages that are built by Ceph team, because they install those on some version of Ubuntu as well. While for triple O, we use the CentOS packages. So I guess this depends on the job. Probably different jobs can be configured differently.
So I think, Eric, your question about Mimic was, should we phrase this as we'll support like we'll support the supported versions of Ceph plus one older?
Well, I was agreeing that like right now Mimic seems fine, but I don't know what our actual policy is going to be moving forward for when we bump that up.
Can't we follow the upstream release cycle? I mean, Ceph Ceph right now just supports, as you said before, Nautilus and Octopus. So just like we have like the tested runtimes for OpenStack in general, I guess we're trying to find out whether we want a general rule for this, and probably following what supported upstream by Ceph should be the an initial direction, could give an initial direction.
Yeah, I guess the main question was whether people that deploy this actually are keeping up with what Ceph says they support, or if they're moving a little slower than that.
I guess they will be moving slower than that, because upgrading your Ceph cluster is probably non-trivial and something that they may want to postpone.
While upgrading their OpenStack cluster is going to be easier?
Well, let's put it this way, probably upgrading Cinder gives you a lot more benefits than upgrading your Ceph cluster. As in, you upgrade Cinder and suddenly 100 bugs have been fixed, where in Ceph probably you don't basically, it's probably working better. Let's put it that way. So they are less motivated to upgrade. And also, I think that saying that we only support Nautilus and Octopus, seeing as the form that Brian requested from the operators says that we have 12 of them, almost 1/3 of the deployments using older than Octopus. It's probably not a great idea just saying, okay, we don't support you anymore.
No, but I was saying this is a starting point. We could say like after Ceph release is out of support, we're giving you 1 year, and then we're going to not support it anymore, or something like
okay.
that. I mean,
so similar.
I mean,
to
use
what Eric was
the
saying,
dates from upstream. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I like that idea as well. Like we will support +1 or something like that. +1, +2, I don't know their release cycle, if it's 6 months or how long.
They state that the stable branches are supported for about 2 years. And I think they release a new one once a year.
Okay. Then maybe +1 seems reasonable. +1 release, which is something like 3 years.
I mean, seems reasonable.
Well, I can write that up and send it to the mailing list and see if anybody screams about it.
I guess we should probably look product-wise and see how long are we supposed to support Red Hat Ceph Storage for. I don't even know, but that's Nautilus, I think.
But that's for future versions, so it doesn't really matter for like too much. Maybe. Let's see.
Yeah, 3 is Luminous, 4 is Nautilus, 5 is probably going to be Octopus. I'm sorry, no, 5 is probably going to be Pacific. And I mean, 5 years, at least if you're, I mean, that's probably the downstream plan.
So what's the proposal we're landing on here is we support what is supported by Ceph plus 1 year?
I think so.
Okay.
Let me, before I send something out to the operators list, I'll put it on Etherpad and then we can talk about it at next week's meeting. Everybody can read through and make sure it makes sense.
Yeah, and we can probably check the packages as someone suggested to see what's there right now to give us a reference.
Yeah. Okay.
Does anybody remember the percentage of external Ceph clusters versus one installed with OpenStack? Because if they're installed together with OpenStack, they're going to upgrade OpenStack and Ceph is going to be upgraded. I don't remember the percentage.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right, that's for O, right? When everything goes together.
That's specific for O users. And my feeling was that it was about 50-50. But it's a subset of a subset because it's specific to O, and then it's
And since this came up with the V2 clone API work, do we need to think at all about Ceph client versioning versus Ceph server versions? Or can we just kind of assume they're mostly aligned? I don't know if that's really a relevant part of what we need to do here or not.
Well, at least we should think about it, I would guess, to at least document and make clear our assumptions. Like you say, if we assume that they are aligned, we just have to make sure that we say so.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
it hasn't
Sure.
come up. Yeah, it hasn't come up much, I don't think, in any practical way yet. But I think generally, if we're working on RBD driver stuff that's going to target Nautilus, we're basically going to assume you have a client that is at least from Nautilus too.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that doesn't seem to be like a kind of onerous requirement.
Not when everything works the way it's supposed to.
Okay, well, that's good. Well, we can circulate this on the operators list, see if anybody screams about it, and then if everything's okay, we can go ahead and update the docs and make this an official policy. Okay. Any comments, questions?
I'm just trying to think if there's any implications for stable branches as far as we end of life support for Ceph version X on master, but then maybe we have some CI for a few stable branches ago still running an older one. I don't know if we need to, I don't know if there's anything to figure out there or not. I guess it's just like anything else where we just say the versions that are supported match, you know, whenever that version was released.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So, did John just leave? John Fulton?
Oh, hi, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, did you I think you pasted the versions in the Etherpad?
The specific Red Hat versions I did, yeah.
Yeah. What's the status of 2? So that's still supported downstream?
Yeah, I mean, Red Hat customers can still buy an extension for that. So it's similar to version 10 of Red Hat OpenStack. We're talking specifically about Red Hat.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that it works with newer OpenStack.
Right.
Right.
All right, good. Anything else? Okay, then let's move to the next topic about the exclusive Cinder pool. I'm going to update the PTG bot.
Yeah, this topic is about a configuration option I added a while ago okay, so we have changed through time the way that the Ceph driver reports the stats to the scheduler, and before Queens, we basically reported. We were assuming that the whole pool that Cinder was using was being used just by Cinder. So we would go and report. Basically, we didn't check things. Cinder already knew the amount of the size of the total size of the volumes that were provisioned, and we would just need to report the use space and free space. The rest was irrelevant. But then I think it was Queens, we changed it and we started returning the exact size that was being used by Cinder. So if you were sharing your pool with something else, or if the same pool was used by two different Cinder backends, you would be reporting just the size, the amount used by your volumes. This had a problem because the way the Librados works is you don't have a single command saying give me the sizes of all the volumes in this location. You have to go one by one requesting give me the size, give me the size. So when you have a couple thousand volumes or tens of thousands, you end up having to do, each time you do your stats, you have to do 10,000 requests each time, and that takes a while. So we found that suddenly you would start your Ceph cluster, your Cinder service, and it could take a couple of minutes for it to actually start running. And that was because it was doing this operation, getting everything. So since there are many deployments that were already using it exclusively, the pool exclusively for Cinder, it made sense for those to go back to the way we were reporting before. And I was thinking that maybe we should change the default back to how we used to do it before Queens, because there are a lot of deployments that with the default, they will, when upgrading, if they don't set it, they will stop working, or it may be working today and suddenly a year from now, when the number of volumes keeps growing and growing, suddenly it stops reporting, either it stops responding correctly, or you start seeing that the Cinder service starts saying, I'm up, I'm down, I'm up, I'm down. And that is when the amount of time it takes you to get all the stats is longer than the time Cinder, than the heartbeat time. So I was thinking that maybe we should just change it to be the default. And I was wondering if anybody had a strong opinion on the contrary.
I absolutely agree with you, because it's useful feature. In our installation, we set this to true once this option became available, and it fixes a lot of issues with instability of Cinder volume surveys.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what we've basically found is that if you have a deployment that has any real life amount of data on it, you have to set this or it stops working. So it seems kind of clear to me that we do need to just make this the default. And then if somebody doesn't want it for some reason, they can change it. But it's too problematic not having it as the default.
Yes, agree.
Yeah, I agree. And then if they explicitly change it, then they will be aware that they need to watch out for these other problems that can occur.
Is there a like 1 or 2 sentence explanation of why someone would want to turn this back off? Like what's the benefit you gain by doing that?
Well, you get better stats reporting from the Ceph driver if you were using this for Cinder and for something else. you would get better stats in Cinder and know, and theoretically your scheduler will be able to work better. But I'm not 100% sure that that is true. So that would be a theory.
I think that, yeah, it's accurate enough not doing that, I think, is what we've found. So
yeah, because like you said, most deployments will run into this problem, which is a bigger problem than having your stats not perfect. If Cinder doesn't work, it's worse. Okay, so I guess we are in agreement. So I will make the change.
Sounds good.
Question: as this could be considered a bug fix for many real-world deployment, is it something that I guess stable people are going to shoot me? But is this something that could be backported to the older branches, or no?
I don't think we need to backport it to stable branches because it's just a change of configuration options. And if operators need this change, they need just to update their config file.
Right, but just, I mean, the default deployment it's supposed to be working without touching too many things. So I'm not sure what the deployment tools, OpenStack, Ansible, or Puppet, that's if they set this option, but probably not. But that would make sense to have it at sane default.
I think it's a good idea. But I think it's a good idea from the point of view of making things sane. But I'm not so sure from the point of view of changing a configuration option from what they are already getting.
It could.
If we
could
don't
lead to some. Oh, sorry.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say, if we don't change it, the deployment tools are just gonna go set it instead for us, I would think. So
Well,
I mean, we could compromise with a release note to the stable branches, just pointing out that there's a known issue and it can be addressed by changing this option. Although I don't know that that's much better than just changing the option. But
of course, it wouldn't impact existing deployment. It's just for new deployment, which for some reasons are going to use Victoria or Suri or Train.
Yes, and if we decide to backport this, it will affect all existing deployments who did not add this option to the configuration file.
I think it all comes down to what was said about we want staying default, and apparently what we currently have in our stable branches is not sane, because over time it will make things fail. So I'm actually in favor of backporting it. I don't think it hurts. Even if we are changing the behavior, the changes probably in the scheduler is minimum. So I could do it.
I'm not normally a huge fan of changing defaults on backports, but I think there's a good argument for it here. Is there any strong objection?
Well, I don't see Sean around, so maybe that's why we don't have a strong objections.
yeah, I mean, so the only thing is, right?
You snooze, you lose.
I don't know. I guess I'm sort of on the fence with this. Because the way things work, you just don't need to mention this at all, right? And you get the default. So people who actually like it are going to be in the situation where they're going to have to actually reconfigure to get the default behavior back.
Yeah, but I'm not sure many people even know the difference in the stats. So what they are liking is that things work. If 6 months from now they create a lot of more volumes and it stops working, and then they have to start doing the RCA and figuring out what is going on. And it's not that trivial to figure that the problems come from here. Most people go to the Ceph cluster and see, oh, why is Ceph failing? Why it's not working as it should? And checking this in the Cinder logs is a bit of a problem to figure out that it's the stats, the things that is messing you up.
Yeah, I guess what I'd say is let's do a like an enhanced release note for the stable branches. I mean, in one sense, it only impacts a subset of Cinder users anyway, because it's only affecting the Ceph backend. And we suspect that most people are deploying it so that Cinder uses Ceph completely and you don't face this issue. But I guess I would just feel better if there's like a, if we do it in like really big, bold letters, you know. If you're
Okay,
a Ceph
we
user,
can do that.
yeah, if you're a Ceph user, please check this.
Like we can do it to make sure
Yeah.
that we specify the change.
Yeah.
Like if you are upgrading to the latest stable, be aware that we have changed this default because this happens. So
Yeah,
give
and then
a proper explanation.
Yeah, I think that'd be fine. Okay. All right. Any other?
So is it that we're just going to do the release note, or we're going to backport it with a big ass release?
We're going to backport it, but with the release, we'll enhance the release note when it goes back to the.
Okay.
Well, you just decide what you want to do, Gorka. I mean, maybe the same release note is master's fine, because if you're.
I'm going to write a master release note and probably maybe add to the documentation this, and I will backport everything, because I agree that this is probably something that needs to be properly explained, so that when people are if people are having problems with their current deployment in Ceph and they go check, they can see, oh, this has been fixed in the latest stable, because there is enough documentation explaining it. Yep.
Okay, then that sounds good. Okay, great.
Yeah, I think, if the documentation has something Googleable, like, has my Ceph cluster suddenly stopped updating quickly? Here's what might be the problem.
Okay, great. Let's just. All right, I see you got the action in there. Good. Okay. Next topic is also Gorka. This is replication.
Yep. First of all, I was wondering from people's customers, how many are actually using replication within the feature, the openstack-cinder feature, not replication. For example, yeah, sure, Ceph replicates their volumes, the images. Not that is our replication. They fail back, fail over, and all that. Does people know how many of their customers are currently using this? Crickets? That many? 0. Okay.
So I know that there are customers using, but I don't know exactly how many for Solidifier users.
Yeah, I don't know. For Solidifier, we have we've been fixing some issues on replication for a few releases now, but in fact, none of them were requests from customers. So I'm not sure. I don't know if we have people using. We are trying to make it it's currently working now, but we never got a request from user to make the replication actually works. And I think in two releases before, we have several issues that would make impossible to use the replication with Solidifier, and nobody was complaining. So I guess that at least until 2 releases ago, nobody was using replication with Solidifier. For OnTap, I think it's the same. I don't have any feedback from customers regarding replication. It's something, yeah, it's a great tool, but I don't know if at least for the NetApp drivers.
All the arguments we went through to get it implemented, nobody's using it.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you know, Lucio, a specific customer that could be using it? And I don't need to say the customer, basically.
I remember that I received some emails asking about active support on OnTap drivers, but we currently don't have plans to implement it, and they didn't ask about it again, so I think they can live without it. So yeah, we need to have a customer survey for collecting this kind of information, and still don't have such information yet. So yeah, we can't help on this answering.
Well, I think in a way you did, because Fernando said, yeah, it was not even working a couple of releases ago and nobody complained. That's a clear point of the number of people using it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry.
Is it something we want to add to a Cinder user survey, or the next OpenStack user survey, to see if anybody can give us data points on that?
Probably, yep. But my question was mostly not as much as know how many, but what their feedback was like, or what is preventing them from using it, were their experience with it, because I think there are some things that maybe we should work on.
Right.
To make it better.
We could try
right
to
now
survey ourselves, that we can ask those kind of questions, because the overall survey doesn't seem to get you very fine-grained responses.
That's true. Are we currently on the cheesecake version or the tiramisu version? Did we ever get tiramisu fully implemented?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
We have it. We have failover, failback, promotion. Things that we don't have, for example, are a way to test this with like a canary test to make sure that, yeah, things are working. So my cloud is working, Cinder is working, but I want to be sure that the day I do a failover, it will actually work. This is like backups. You want to be sure that things are working before you need to use them. So, and we don't have any mechanism to do it right now. We have to do a full failover to test it. And I think we should try to figure out a way to canary test this on a live system so that operators can periodically confirm, okay, everything is working, I'm good, or something like that. Or we can automate it and do it ourselves every X days configurable and check, and if it's not working, report it. I don't know, but at least have the mechanism. Automating it's a different thing. I think at least we should have it. And for this, I would like to ask a bit the vendors about the facilities they have on their systems to do a single volume failover scenario. For RBD, it's simple because it has been programmed to do a per volume replication, and so we can just promote or change a single one. It will require some changes to make sure for the specific code that we will have for the test, but it's easy for us for RBD. And I'm wondering other vendors, for example, those that are doing the whole pool, replicated pool, that they probably cannot just fail over a single volume because it's the whole pool. So I don't know if they have different mechanisms to test these things. For those of you who have it in your driver, are you doing per volume replication or whole pool replication? I see. Everybody implemented this 3 years ago and has not looked back.
Hi guys, Helen here. Yeah, we have a mix of both, actually, Gorka. So depending on our replication protocol in the Paramax, we do a mix of both. So yeah, we haven't received any customer feedback, but I think IBM Power VC are picking it up in their next release. So they would have a lot of Paramax customers. Yeah, so all of our testing would be in-house by our QA team, and they haven't had any issues that, you know, that we've heard of. So everything seems to work, but that hasn't come from a customer. That's just coming directly from my team.
And in your driver, how can you do a canary test in all your configuration options to confirm, to be able to tell an operator if replication is working fine, failover is working fine, and if you were to failover right now, things would go fine?
As I said, our tests are very much manual at the moment. We are trying to automate that, but it's like, you know, we've no way within Tempest of testing it, you know, on a CI.
No, I was not looking into Tempest or what your driver currently has. Is if you were to implement, if Cinder were to implement a new feature, which is what we would be looking into, a new API, which would call the driver in the end to make a canary test, would you be able to program it in your driver, or this would be impossible to do it without affecting the other volumes that are running in that same backend?
Okay, so off the top of my head, it would depend on what type of replication, because we have 3 different types. Sorry, I probably haven't the correct answer for you off the top of my head, but I've certainly gone. Yeah.
That's a perfect answer. It depends. So the thing is that then the specs should account for different backends, and some backends may depend on the configuration option. So I will start writing a spec and consider this, like some backends with some configuration will not be able to support it. Find a way to well, drivers will have to mention this, which of their options allow this new feature to work. Okay. And yep. So this is going to be fun. Because I think this is one of the things that I've heard customers ask about when they talk about replication. Like, how can I be sure that it's working fine, that it will work fine, and I will not run into a big problem when I try to use it. So I will work on a spec. My other concern regarding this is how for RBD, which is a synchronous replication, we don't have an easy way to make the Cinder volumes, the Nova volumes that are in the Cinder volumes that are used by Nova instances to switch over when we fail over, because they were writing in a cluster and the data was being replicated asynchronously, but suddenly the primary cluster is gone. We have to switch over, but we don't know what data is in the new location. So we cannot just change the volumes in Nova to point to the new location and keep writing, because we could mess things up quite a bit. I know there are different replication mechanisms. So probably for most synchronous drivers that are doing synchronous replication, this is not an issue, because I know some of them are reporting all the paths when doing a multipath connection. So they have both options. I think they report to the multipath which paths are working and which are, let's say, primary, secondary. So I think they don't have a problem. So any vendor here has synchronous replication working?
Yeah, we have synchronous.
Okay, and when you have configured synchronous replication in your driver and you initialize a volume, do you return the connections from the primary and the secondaries?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So when an operator calls Cinder and tells it, please fail over, and your driver does its thing and changes the primary to secondary, I guess multipathing in Nova automatically starts writing to the new location, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so that's the easy case for replication, and I think we should at least document in OpenStack, in our docs, the different scenarios and mention which drivers are doing synchronous replication and how they are working, because people may think that all replication is the same, and that if it worked on a Dell driver, it will work on a RBD or things like that. And I don't have a solution for drivers that are not doing synchronous replication. So I guess we should document that problem, and maybe I will try to think of an alternative they can do manually or something like that. I don't know. Anybody has any idea of what the best approach to recover VMs with asynchronous replication? Is it to go one by one and checking what is going on, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think things get tricky in the PowerMax driver whenever we work with async, because we have to manage all of the volumes together. So if we perform any volume operations, all of our volumes pertaining to a particular volume type all have to be suspended, then resumed again together. So if you were to do something like a canary test on async, you would suspend replication for every volume that matches that volume type on the PowerMax backend. So that's where it would get tricky for async. And then we have another replication type metro. When it's the same again, they all have to be managed together. So
okay, so for your driver, you would be problematic.
yeah, you would have to ensure that the volume type you are using isn't in use by the end user. So if you could confirm that, then you could run a canary test isolated from all the rest of the volume types. But if you happen to use a volume type that matched the backend configuration in terms of, PowerMax settings, then you could inadvertently impact the replication in their environment.
Okay, and for asynchronous replication, how would you go if customer says, okay, I have replication in your driver, it's working, it's asynchronous, and now my primary is dead for whatever reason, and I want to get my VMs back online. How would you go about making them available? Because would you tell them to restart their VMs, kill the ones they had, and restart the new ones, or what would you suggest?
Well, our colleague actually implemented a feature this time around that went into Victoria. It's all about that. So it was a disaster recovery scenario, how to get things back. So it's a pity he's actually on vacation at the moment, so he's not here to share. Michael, you might have might have a few snippets there of information.
Yeah, it was all work around failover and promotion. So I don't know much about it, to the same level of technical detail that Simon would, but has our documentation merged yet for Victoria? Because he would have written about it in there, so we would have been able to get an idea of what's going on.
I'm not sure it's merged, but it would be up there anyway.
2 seconds, I'll have a check to see if I can find it, and we can at least get some of the technical info that we're putting into our documentation about that. It might paint a better picture for us.
Great, because I think this feature is lacking in documentation from a user and from an administrator perspective, from both. Well, the user shouldn't care really about this, but for an operator, they should know, depending on their hardware, how they have configured what they can get out of replication. So they can set their expectation accordingly, or during deployment, they can choose the right configuration options for their needs. Okay, that's basically my...
I've just put the review there into chat.
Perfect.
If there's anything of relevance.
I'll put into the chat, or I'll put it into the Etherpad, the link to our documentation around failover hosts and promotion for the Victoria release.
Well, okay, I don't want to make us wait more on this. I will try to split this, what we talk, into 2 things. One is to work on the canary spec, and the other would be documentation improvement. For the documentation, I will probably, once I make a proposal, I will try to ping all the driver support, whoever, the email that it's in the CI, at least for the people I know directly, to get their feedback on what's been said there and to confirm that for their drivers that makes sense. And that way they can also maybe get their documentation in sync what we are saying there, because I think this is a nice feature that we just need to get it properly documented and improve a little bit a feature for it to be actually useful and used by people. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, there's a big section on failover promotion way at the bottom of the patch.
Yeah, I plan on reading that document. I didn't want everybody waiting while I read.
No, so how are you visualizing the canary test at this point, or is it still abstract?
I think it's a little bit early. I don't have it clear because there are two things I think are important. One is the Cinder side of things, which is basically you write data, you create a volume, it's replicated, you write data, you stop writing, now you fail over the other and you read data. Depending if it's synchronous or asynchronous. If it's synchronous, you have, when you start reading, all the data must be there. If it's async, let's just say you are hoping part of it's there.
Right.
So yeah, there would need to be some way for a driver to give an estimate on the time the test has to wait for it to be sure that there is at least some data. So if you know your async replication is being done on a schedule, it would make no sense, because I know some drivers have that possibility, then it makes no sense to do this test out of that schedule.
Yeah.
What would you get if you know you're not going to have any data there? So there are like 3 or 4 cases. Some are easy. Synchronous is easy. But then I don't know if we should extend it to the full feature, which is from a Nova instance perspective. As in, sure, this is nice that Cinder does it, but is the multipathing part also working properly? And that requires Nova to get into a mix. And I don't know if this should be a Nova feature, the one that driving everything, or if Cinder should call Nova, create an instance. But that, it's scary if Cinder has to do the call. Or maybe it's a Cinder manage operation. You have the Cinder part, and the Cinder manage operation creates the volume and does the whole cycle thing, the whole feature test. I have to give it a thought because it's not easy.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would say if we let's go with what we have, like the basic stuff, see if they are working. So following the back, proposing the test, the canary test, we can see how to implement that in the gates using Ceph probably, and that's a message for the other third-party CIs. So if we manage to implement that, we're probably using Ansible and the power of Zool to do things operations on the various nodes. That's something you may want to possibly recycle or reuse or adapt for your internal CIs, but that means you will need to have Zool v3. So that's another. We had some discussion about legacy CIs, so that's another good reasons to upgrade. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned yesterday that, I don't know if it was Tom, that there is a container for Zool v3. So maybe that's an easier way to get to Zool v3. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, there was a presentation on that at the summit. I'll see if I can find the link to it. But it was just using a Docker container to deploy everything.
I have a question. I'm sitting here listening. Everything is great, but as a former sysadmin, if replication is it's not just Cinder, What about Nova and Neutron and all the other stuff? If things are not tied up on all the spots, if I'm going to deploy OpenStack and say, okay, I have a replication, everything needs to work. It's not just Cinder. I mean, it's not our fault, it's not our duty or whatever to make it happen everywhere. But if it's not going to be tied up to Neutron and Nova and all the others, people are not going to use this. It's not just Cinder. It's not Cinder alone.
True. But I wanted to, that is completely true. This is a whole OpenStack feature in terms of, okay, this has died, how do I make it happen? But in this case, we were just, the feature we were focusing, because it's not even completed with this thing, is just what happens if somebody makes your storage rack explode. Basically, it's, no, your computer fine, but your storage is gone, your primary. That is, so it's true, I agree with you. This is a very narrow scope, and we have to think bigger, because people want to be able to, okay, my whole site has gone out. I want that work to start on the secondary. But yeah, that's a whole different monster. And maybe we have to think about it at some point, but yeah, it's scary, that one, because you have to have your database replicated on the other side. And
I agree with you. My point is, if we don't get the other parts, as we see, I'm not aware of any customer that's using this. So it's a chicken and egg. I don't know what needs to be done. If we invest here and it's not going to be used, it might be a waste of time.
True. So maybe we get this. I will add an action there as well for me to, once this is done, to go and have a conversation with the other groups about how they would approach the disaster recovery scenario, because this is bigger than Cinder. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if this helps, but whenever we're trying to refresh paths after failing over to a secondary site, we have to Nova shelve the VM, and then shelve and then unshelve. So it's effectively restarting it to activate the path to the R2 side, if that's what you're referring to there. So it's not just enough to issue Cinder failover host. You got to go to Nova and shelve the VM that volume is associated with, and then unshelve it to effectively tell it to use the R2 array.
So that, for what driver was that?
That's PowerMax.
PowerMax. Okay,
Yeah.
Then that's probably mentioned in the document that you pasted, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. That's precisely that's the kind of feedback I was looking for. How different vendors, what their procedure was. I know some doesn't have to do anything, and some needs, for example, share and unshelve. And maybe we need to look at this also from a Cinder managed operation that does things for you. It's not just about the failover. If you fail over but you don't know what to do with your Cinder volumes, with your Nova instances to make them work, the feature will not be used, or when they are going to use it, they will find that they don't know how to. Okay, thank you.
All right, great. All right, I'd like to propose we take a break. It's 14:49. Let's take a 10-minute break and kick off again at 1500. So I'm going to stop the recording, and then somebody remind me to resume it when we come back. Okay, so we'll be on break till 1500.